There's a rise of fascism. It's obvious. People's rights are being taken away. ICE are taking people off the streets without reason, without a badge, not showing their faces. It's very reminiscent of Nazi Germany, and I don't want to over exaggerate when I say that, but the facts are simple. They're there. We are heading in a negative direction in this country that could have been easily avoided, but people wanted to say slurs again at work, I guess, and now we're getting this. And this big, beautiful bill which will gut Medicaid, put 12 million people out of their health insurance, give billionaires more tax breaks, and a bunch of other shitty stuff. Well, how do we get here? There are a lot of ways, a lot of paths that have led to this moment. Trump's run for presidency, culture shift, poor leadership from the Democrats, poor running of a Democrats' campaign countless numbers of times, the Democrats' rejection for any new ideas or new politicians. It's really a lot down to the Democratic Party, unfortunately, that has given the Republicans the push they needed to put fascism back into our country. And in the book I'm talking about today, The Iron Heel, is an American novel written by an American author, takes place in America, but of course it was written over 100 years ago in 1907. So Jack London, of course, is a relatively famous American author. I feel like kids probably read at least one of his books in elementary, middle, or high school. Probably talk about him at least once during your public education throughout your years. He's most known for the Call of the Wild, which of course is the book about the wolf and the snow in Alaska. I think I have not read the book because it seems kind of boring. But there's a movie, I think, with Harrison Ford. So maybe I won't watch that either, but he's a well-known author. But what I did know about him is that he was a socialist, like a lot of writers at the time, because of the growing socialism and communism movement in America that was due mostly to the exploitation of labor, like what can be seen with Upton Sinclair and his book The Jungle, or the muckrakers who would go and work at these factories for the bit or investigate these factories and just poor living conditions and show them to the world, and which got people saying, hey, maybe we should pay people more money and they shouldn't maybe be disabled when they go into work because they get their arms cut off by a faulty machine. Jack London, he was a socialist, and he saw what was happening to this country, and he did not like the direction it was going in, so he decided to write a sci-fi-ish novel, but it was also known as a book that heavily inspired George Orwell's 1984. He said that it heavily inspired his own book, and so it's very influential, but not a lot of people know about it. But what I want to focus on is the Iron Heel and the prophetic imagery, the prophetic warnings Jack London gives in this book, which are slowly coming true in present-day America, and it's very scary to read, given the fact we're only 6 months into Trump's presidency, and nothing is looking better. He is not rolled over yet. He has not gone permanently to Florida. It seems like he's going to be here for a while, for worse. Not better or worse, for worse. And we, the American people, who don't like him, the majority of the country do not like him anymore. His approval ratings are extremely low, have to deal with this, and have to deal with the few, not few, there's still a lot of MAGA heads who will spew misinformation and hate whenever they get the chance. And we just have to deal with it because we don't have a lot of power. But that could change, but it could also change for the worse. And this is shown in The Iron Heel. So basically, a quick summary of the plot of The Iron Heel is basically, the book is written, it's not very long, it's around 200 pages long, and it's written in the format of a lost manuscript that was found recently, kind of like a diary. And the person who wrote this was Avis Everhard, the wife of Ernest Everhard, who was like a revolutionary. He kind of started this socialist movement in America, and he was executed along with his wife after a failed uprising. But that was 300 years ago. And they found this manuscript like 300 years later. And basically throughout the book, there's this historian who's editing throughout and adding notes saying like, this is what actually happened, or, this also happened, providing context. So we know in the future, about 300 years later, the socialist movement does take over from the Iron Heel, which is the oligarchy that is controlling America and also kind of spreading far and wide across the globe. And so it's an interesting way to read a book too, because the ending of it is also very abrupt. It just cuts off mid-sentence And the guy adds a note being like, well, they're about to die here, so I mean, they probably had to cut it off. And the book follows Avis Everhard. She's born to like a pretty nice lifestyle. Her father is like a professor at university. They're relatively well off. They live in Berkeley. And she slowly discovers a socialist ideology and what that means for America, and the rise of fascism in America, and the wealthy men and women who are trying to stomp out the socialist movement. The Iron Heel becomes stronger and stronger before it takes over America. It becomes relatively dystopian, and yeah, that's basically what the book's about. It's written in a way where some chapters are more action based, like things are moving along, especially in the end when like shit's going down and they're trying to revolt and they're plotting and all that stuff. But a lot of the chapters are almost formatted kind of similarly to The End of the Jungle by Upton Sinclair, which is also another socialist book which focused on the exploitation of workers. If you have not read the book The Jungle, at the end, it's basically like the last 20 pages are just like why socialism is great. And he's like talking at us. And The Iron Heel does not go to that length where I feel so disconnected from the novel, but in this, Ernest Everhard, he spends a lot of his time arguing with other people of power, like priests or bishops, or people who own local businesses, people in the middle class, and eventually even arguing with the people he's against, the millionaires who are controlling the government, the courts, the news. And he gives these very long speeches about his ideology and why he thinks he's right, and the true gritty face of America. And almost all the time, he's met with a resounding, that's not possible, that's not happening here, you're out of your mind, you've gone to too many liberal classes, you're crazy. I found the way it was written very, very interesting and very intriguing and not boring at all, actually. I found all of his talking points very interesting because as someone who doesn't know relatively that much about socialism, I learned a lot from the book and a lot of their ideology, and just kind of it puts you in a place where, kind of similar to The Jungle, of what life was really like back then before going into the more dystopian era of the novel. So, this Iron Heel, what are they? Well, they're the millionaires who own the country, which is, of course, not similar at all in any way to what Elon Musk tried to do or what Donald Trump is doing and all those tax breaks he's giving for his loyal members and fellow billionaires and millionaires. So there, again, Jack London kind of hits the nail on the head there. And he shows that, yeah, these people, they don't even have to be elected into power. They can elect whoever they want to power, and they can spend as much money as they want controlling the courts, buying lawyers, buying newspapers out and having them not report information or falsely reporting information. They're able to control whatever they want, all because they have their money, and they're never going to stop making more money because they're exploiting the labor and they're exploiting the working class, and nothing can change that because they own the government. And there's a very interesting part which I think also aligned well with today's America, where Ernest goes, visits, heads of different unions. They're not exactly millionaires, but they make a very solid living. They're comfortable. They're defined as the middle class, upper middle class, and they're not entirely convinced about the socialist movement and the warnings Ernest is giving them because they feel comfortable. Sure, they have gripes with the plutocracy. All these warnings Ernest is giving to them about eventually the plutocracy smothering and absorbing the middle class. They find that all completely baffling and not possible. And then, of course, Ernest schools them again, and he gives this really great quote where he goes, middle class is between a lion and a tiger. And the lion, the plutocracy, the top 1%, and the tiger, the proletariats, the bottom lower class, who are ready to tear apart the middle class at any second. And they're sitting in this interesting bubble, this interesting void between high and low. I think it just relates well to a lot of people who maybe voted for Trump because financial situations, because the middle class often has an issue of thinking that they can never go back down to the lower class, they can never lose all their money, and they aspire to be more like the 1%, they aspire to make more money, they aspire to get more power. And they never see themselves truly at threat because they live a pretty comfortable life. They have a decently sized house, they have a decently large family, they work decent hours, they don't see any threat in their lifestyle, so they may vote willy-nilly. They may vote for a person who tells them, hey, by the way, this other party is trying to give all their money to these poor people, and that's going to take away from you and not from the billionaires, because they got to hold on to their money so they can run the businesses in this country. And yeah, I think this plays well into how so many middle class people voted for Trump because of either religious or political or economy, any of those beliefs. But the same goes for back in the Iron Heel and how the middle class think they're safe from any harm. But eventually, as we see in the novel, they get swallowed up. It's only the top 1% and the proletariat's at the very bottom. There is no in between. And that is what I fear could happen in America. Hopefully not. I think the Iron Heel is definitely a step too far in the dystopian sense. I don't think any of that is happening in America soon. My favorite part about the book, though, is when Ernest goes and visits the 1%, the millionaires, the people who are controlling the government, and they know about the socialist movement, and they're really bringing him to, it's like this fancy, club or whatever where they meet up, and they bring people in to talk about science and arts. They fly him out from, Europe, because they want to feel special. They want to feel like they have any artistic value or interest, when really their only interest is making more and more money and exploiting more and more people. But they decide to bring Ernest one day because you really want to bring him in to make fun of him and laugh at him, because who is this poor socialist guy saying that the socialists are going to take over America and that the top 1% are evil, malicious creatures. So Ernest comes in and basically he just goes up in front of this crowd of wealthy people and he starts telling them, you guys are the problem. The socialists are going to take over. Your greed will stop one day. We'll have the power. You won't anymore. You may have the courts right now. You may have the papers. You may have more firepower, but nothing will stop the socialist movement. These wealthy people, they're outraged by this. They're offended by it, and they're yelling, we're not like that. How could you claim this is happening in our country? Our country is a fair democracy. It's a capitalist country. That's not possible. Fascism is not possible here. And they're yelling, they're arguing, and it's almost like pandemonium. They're all trying to get to Ernest. They all want to be convinced that they're good people, because no one wants to truly think, I'm a bad person. I love... sure, they love the money, but in some sick way, they think, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm making money, sure, but everyone has to make money, and at least I'm paying these people something. They think they're doing the right thing, in kind of a sick and twisted way, but although in their head they justify it. And they're afraid to be met with shame and having to feel guilt about what they're doing. They want to justify themselves and think they're doing something right, especially in this capitalist system, which basically tells you when you're making more money, you're doing right. You're making more money, you're successful, and that urges you on to make more money no matter what. They're arguing, they're yelling at him, and it's crazy. Until one man, Mr. Wixon, who's another random billionaire, owns some railroads probably, I forget exactly. He stands up and he acknowledges, yeah, we're evil. And now you told us all this stuff. We're going to be ready for you guys, because if you come at us, we're going to come at you. And actually, no, we're going to come at you now before you're even ready, and we're going to take away all your rights, stomp you guys out before you can get to us. It's a fight for power. And he tells the group of people, he points at Ernest Everhard and he goes, there stands the bear, which is a threat. And he says, this is the best part of the book for me. He says, what if we crush the bear? And everyone goes, oh, wait a second. We can just kill all these guys. And they all start murmuring in agreement and they're like, oh, yeah. And another good quote is, we will grind you revolutionaries down under our heel, which of course relates to the Iron Heel and how it crushes everyone. And Ernest is kind of smug, he's kind of nonchalant, and he's like, okay, well, we're going to be ready, it's going to be a fight, you want it that way, you're going to get it that way. We're going to fight each other. And that kind of is what sets off, really, the book. It sets it off into a new world. And so I think we've also seen that the shift of also knowing you're evil in American politics, especially with Trump in modern times, when recently, I saw this in the news recently, Trump referred to bankers
in some cases a fine banker, and in some cases Shylocks.
I don't know what you call it exactly, but it's just the sheer, also with Trump and MAGA supporters, just the sheer and outright lack of shame, lack of guilt, which also contradicts, before wanting to think they're right. But now it's kind of the exact opposite, where they're like, yeah, we hate black people. We hate Latinos. Get out of our country. We're going to feed you to the alligators. We're going to feed all the Latinos in this country to the alligators, like Laura Loomer tweeted the other day, who is best known for eating dog food on stream because she's a fucking ghoul. It's just we're seeing kind of both sides. Before, people thinking, no, we're just doing what's best for our country. But now it's just Let's get back to only white people. They're eating the cats and dogs. Let's just round up any Latino person, any potential illegal without notice, throw them into a van, ship them off to Florida, feed them to the alligators. The lack of consequences for your actions now in public media, where you can say the most vile things and still have a career in politics or celebrity wise. Backlash to cancel culture back in the 2010s because people were mad they canceled someone because they raped someone. You know what I mean? That's a thing also I find common with middle-aged people who kind of maybe may lean a little more conservative or understand it more because we can't say anything anymore or else we'll get canceled. Which is, no one can really ever get canceled. We've seen that. Logan Paul filmed a suicide. He's back. I mean, even Diddy, he's getting off very easy in the courts. Yeah, but I think just that shift in tone at the end of that chapter with Mr. Rickson and the other 1% is just really threatening and they're very scary, and it just works so well in the book because it gives it this edge now, and it really propels it forward, and it relates well to what's happening in the U.S. right now, like most of it. Another interesting part of the book is also it brings up religion, because of course it has to bring up religion because it's a core part of this country, but not all religion, just Christianity. And it brings up bishops and priests because Ernest does have a conversation with them at the beginning of the book at Avis's, his future wife's house. It's kind of like an intellectual meeting of the minds thing, and he's invited because he's seen as a promising politician and advocate for the working class. And he tries talking to them about socialism and how Christianity is really related to that, and how what they're doing right now is just feeding the capitalist pigs, and it's just feeding the rich people while the poor are left behind. And basically all of them reject that except one guy, Bishop Morehouse, and he's kind of interested, and he's like, no, I want to talk to you more. So they kind of follow him throughout the book, and he talks to him more. And eventually he's a very rich man because he's a very highly respected bishop. And eventually he just sells everything. He leaves his house and he goes out to the streets, and basically he uses all of his money to help those in need. He buys food for people. He helps people. He starts working jobs that a bishop normally would not work. And he's basically giving up his whole life in service for others. He's doing this successfully for a while until the church finds him and they send him to an insane asylum because this guy's crazy. He's following the teachings of Christ and not fucking touching little boys, that type of thing. And he's released again, but then he's kind of tries to help out again, but then he's taken in. But eventually he is killed in the first big revolt in Chicago, which of course kind of ends the book. And he's kind of seeing the crowds that were trying to fight back, which kind of shows that he was always on the side of the working class, and he really was trying to do what's best in the name of the Lord, in the eyes of the Lord. And I want to bring this up because it also very closely follows the rise of far-right Christian ideology from people who don't actually care about the religion at all and are just trying to trick religiously blind and not as smart people to think they're on their side. You see people like Jordan Peterson, who was in that one Jubilee video where they asked him, are you a Christian? He was like, oh, because most of his videos are gay people suck, dude. Jesus is kind of cool, because he's pandering, of course, to the really hardcore Christians or Catholics who follow all the stuff don't be gay, don't have abortions, but they ignore stuff helping the needy, stuff like that. And we've seen that rise where basically any Republican politician has to be a big Jesus lover. They have to praise him in every single tweet. They have to hate on gay people, or Nancy Mace, of course, who's made it her life mission to eat a ton of beans and to hate every single transgender person in the world, all in the name of the Lord, of course. And they all praise the Lord, they praise Jesus, but of course they love Daddy Trump, who has done a couple rapes and who has not given any money to any needy person in his entire life. And how they use basically Jesus in any conversation as an excuse to be hateful and ignorant, and as an excuse to gather more and more people into their cult under the guise of religion and following the teachings of Christ, when really the teachings of Christ are to help the needy, and that would align more socialism and not rampant capitalism and fascism. But what it really all comes down to, the main theme of the book, and the main reason why Jack London got into socialism, is the exploitation of labor. The exploitation of labor today is nowhere near as bad as it was back in the 1900s, early 1900s, when industries were growing at an intensely fast rate, and no one was there to regulate anything, so people would just be worked to the bone all for like a nickel a day. And Jack London saw that and he was disgusted by it. That's what socialism really all comes down to, the exploitation of people, all for, just these capitalists, these one percenters to make a little more money. And today, even though the working conditions are better, we still are not seeing enough progress. Minimum wage is still much too low for the growing inflation, the growing price of food, housing, basically everything. Nintendo Switches, $500 for that thing. But basically, you're seeing the exploitation of labor still, and it's still happening throughout the entire world as well, as we can see in countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and like Dubai, Qatar, where these people are just looking for any sort of money, usually immigrants from Pakistan or India. They're shipped out, a lot of accidents, and they barely make any money. And they make these buildings, which is like seen as art almost. You go to Dubai and it's these big, tall, kind of very slender, very futuristic buildings. And they want to be seen as this modern, like, Mecca or whatever. But really, it's just ugly, tall buildings that really only, like, influencers or soccer players go visit because they have enough money to do so. So after talking about all this and how scary the book is and how scary our future may be, well, what can the American people do about this? What can people who want to see their country move in a better direction do? We're seeing, of course, Mamdani, who is a Democratic socialist who was elected as the Democratic nominee in the primaries to go against Eric Adams probably, and fingers crossed, but he should be winning that, which is showing that people are fed up with the way this country is going. They're fed up with traditional Democratic, liberal, and Republican ideologies because one doesn't do anything and the other is actively trying to destroy any good thing about this country that is left. It's really just you gotta make your voice heard, you gotta go vote, you have to protest when you can. There are 3.5 years left of Trump's presidency, and it's very scary knowing that he can do even more harm to this country. But it's also kind of comforting knowing that his presidency will end one day, and he'll give over power, hopefully. And we have to be positive about the future, because if we're not positive, then nothing good's going to happen. Yeah, so again, thanks for watching, guys. I don't know if I'm going to do more videos like these. I just really want to talk about this book because I really liked it. I do recommend you read The Iron Heel and, just see what you think about it. Form an opinion on it of your own. Read books. I love reading. People should read more. A lot of people these days I talk to don't read at all. It's kind of sad. And maybe if more people read, we wouldn't be in the situation we are now in the United States. So yeah, happy late 4th of July to any of those who celebrated it. It was kind of a sad one, but next one, hopefully, we'll be happy. Au revoir.